Thank you, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Thank you. I have a confession to make right out of the gate that I am a slow learner. It took me a long time to realize that in life, everything is about perspective. And if you think about it, Oscar Wilde, the great poet, once said, "Two men stood behind bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars." And it's interesting when you think about that because I come from a political background. I ran 5 times. My very first election, I think I won by 14 votes. They call me Landslide Fury. And then I won my second election, and my third election, my fourth, and my fifth, and you almost think you're invincible. And then I had this great idea that I'd switch from provincial politics to federal politics, and I did. And I ran in one of the toughest seats in Newfoundland that used to be held by John Crosby, who became a great friend of mine. And when the votes came in that night, having been used to winning and all the euphoria that goes with that, I lost. And I lost bad. And it taught me a number of things. It showed me just how lonely politics can be and what rejection was like and how suddenly everything went cold and quiet. No fax machines, no assistants, no cell phones, no meetings, no schedules. It all just simply died. But winning taught me how to succeed. Failing taught me a lot about myself. And it taught me that failure is not an inadequacy. And it taught me that in every failure, there's a little gem of learning. You can find that gold nugget if you really look hard for it. And it became for me a time to rise, to learn, to seek, to try to be a better person. For failure is not a collapse. In fact, it strips away the illusion. It puts you in front of the mirror coldly, and it shows you for what you really are. And it reveals, if you let it, it reveals what you can become. Now let me just take you through 4 spectacular failures that led to 4 incredible successes. Steve Jobs started a computer company in his father's garage with his friend, brought it across the commercial bridge, created Apple, had a big difference with his board of directors, unfortunately, and they fired him. Can you imagine the humiliation, the frustration, the hurt, and the pain he must have felt being fired from a company that he invented? But he didn't lay his tools down. He went and he bought and created 2 new companies, Next and Pixar. And he turned those into powerful engines of new technology. He took that new money and he bought back his old company. And he drove it to market capital gains of $1 trillion. It's worth $3 trillion this morning. So Job's in the rearview mirror. You can see his strewn with failures. But he used those failures to create great success. And we all know this guy, the next guy, Albert Einstein. When Einstein, they say, brought home his 5th grade report card, his mother opened it, and it said, "Albert's a very poor student." Can you imagine? But it followed him through his life because when he tried to get into the Swiss Polytechnic University, he failed the entrance exams. And then after he graduated, which was a struggle, he couldn't find work. Not in academia, not in research. They finally hired him as a tutor. And they fired him from that shortly after he was hired. This was a man whose road was full of failure, but he turned science on its ear. He won the Nobel Prize for Physics for his work in photoelectric light waves. He hadn't even brought forward the theory of relativity yet. That was still bubbling and curdling in the background. But look at what he did. He turned failure into massive success. Walt Disney. Disney worked for a newspaper. The editor was so frustrated with him that he fired him. And he said this about Disney: he lacks imagination. Can you imagine the fertile mind that was on fire with Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse and all of these people that brought such joy to the world? He was rejected. He personally went bankrupt many times. But he rose from the ashes and he built a $250 billion company that's brought joy and magnificence worldwide. J.K. Rowling, newly divorced, living in a government house, struggling, trying to make ends meet, rejected by 12 publishers. Can you imagine being one of those publishers today? The 13th Bloomsday took a chance. They gave the book to a bunch of kids and said, read chapter 1. And they were riveted. And she went on to sell 500 million copies. $52 billion industry. Just extraordinary. So failure is not an end. It's a fork in the road. It's a chance to recalibrate. It's a chance to look at new possibilities. And your experiences and the hurdles you overcome shape your impact. All of us. And all of us in this room, by the way, have failed at something. All of us. But with knowledge and empathy and resilience, I think we can use our failures to bring about a more hopeful world in many ways. And failure, they're not roadblocks, they're stepping stones toward a bigger personal purpose for you. And every setback is a launch pad, and every failure is a chance to grow. So I want to say one last thing. Failure makes the impossible possible. Now, I'll leave you with one final thought. The great Hungarian-Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke, who was a deeply reflective poet, wrote some of the most beautiful essays and poems ever written in English literature. At the height of his fame, a young German boy wrote him and asked for advice on becoming a poet. Now, Rilke could have blown him off, could have said, get lost, I'm famous, but he didn't. He sat down and he wrote a deeply reflective, beautiful letter, gorgeous letter. And after Rilke died, they put these letters together in a book called Letters to a Young Poet. I recommend the book to you. Now, when you see this quote that I'll put up in a second, I want it to go into your brains, but I really want it to reside in your hearts. And he said, perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. And may you face all your failures with beauty and courage.